I'm Kathy Osborne. I think I know most of you personally. We've talked, but I head up the Regional Business Council, and my colleague here is Katie Kaufman in the back, and as you know, she heads up all of our talent initiatives and particularly provides all the services around Young Professionals Network. I am so excited to have you here today. I've been looking forward to this session and looking forward really to the opportunity it affords you. As a young person, really nobody talked to me about these kinds of things. And in fact, I really never learned about it in any kind of formal way. It was just something as my career matured, I sort of learned about, well, what are boards and commissions and how does that work and how does that fit in? I'm real delighted here that we're having this at Armstrong Teasdale today, and I would like to introduce Ahmed Shah, who's a partner and chair of the firm's diversity committee, just for a couple of words of welcome.
Thanks, Kathy. I want to thank Kathy and the RBC for the opportunity to host you here, all of you here today. This is a phenomenal program. I want to welcome the people in the Leadership 100 and all the other honored guests. I think we have a couple of people in this year's leadership class, and I know they have had a phenomenal experience, and I hope that the rest of you have had one as well. Mike Chevelle, our managing partner and a member of the RBC board, wanted to be here to give these welcome remarks, but he could not be here due to a conflict, and he asked me to step in. So I want to welcome you all here. And for those who don't know, Armstrong Teasdale, we are a full-service law firm here in St. Louis, based in St. Louis. We have 243 lawyers throughout Missouri, in Nevada, and also in Shanghai, China. And I wanted to say a couple of things about the RBC because we're really fortunate, I think, to have the Regional Business Council and so many of your employers who kind of recognize that the future of St. Louis and the region really depends on the success in terms of diversity. And there are a number of other organizations and employers who are also focused on it as well. And despite the fact that they're all focused on it, I think none of that will make a huge impact unless all of us actually take these opportunities and do something with them, and that impact really depends on us. And that impact, I don't think, can be seen if we don't dedicate at least a portion of our lives to community and public service, which is why I'm heartened that we're not only hosting an RBC event, but this particular event. So I thank you, Kathy, for the opportunity, and welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know if, I'm assuming for some of you it's the first time in this building, which is it's really a gorgeous facility, and these offices are really remarkable. We had, I guess, one of our Mentor Network receptions here right before it opened, so we're glad to be back here. In your packet, you'll see the survey that we did and asked you questions about you and the region, and we've been out talking about that. A number of you have been with me on those tours, and I appreciate your coming along. And I think there's just a really interesting perspective that you present about the region, what's important to you, where you live, and what do you see as key factors. And obviously jobs is very important to you, and right behind that is affordability. And affordability is one thing we really do have in the St. Louis region. So we have a great quality of life. I'm going to introduce three people to you. One is Deborah Price, who's the Director of State Boards and Commissions. She's an attorney. She came out of the Attorney General's office. She's been in the governor's office for a number of years and been in charge of boards and commissions now for about 3. It probably looks like, well, what a great job that would be. I could just sit there and appoint people to things. It's actually a really, really challenging job. She'll talk about the number of boards and commissions there are. Some of those are under huge demand. Lots of people want them, and some are the right people perhaps, and some maybe aren't the right people. So the vetting process becomes terribly important. And then there's a lot of others that people don't know about, and where you really have to go out and recruit people to be on them. So it's quite a challenging thing to do, not easy, and one that probably is essentially misunderstood by a lot of people. Delighted to have Robert Kinney here. He was one of the founding members of the Young Professionals Network and was on our steering committee. And he was the one that a number of years ago said to me, hey, these social things are nice, but I got to build my business connections. And it was really that first awareness for me of the different needs each of you have. And I use this example a lot, Robert, but you could be the finest attorney in the world, but if you're working for a firm and don't bring in business, someday they're going to have a conversation with you about that. Robert ultimately was appointed to the Public Service Commission. It's one of the, what I would say, most sought after and also most important commissions in the state of Missouri. So the fact that he was asked by the governor personally to take over this says a lot about him, but also says a lot about his knowledge base. So it's great to have Robert back. And he's going to talk a little bit about his perspective on this. And then a real good friend of mine, Jeff Rainford, he's Chief of Staff to Mayor Slay. You probably read a lot about Jeff in the newspaper. He's always in there. He's a straight shooter, so he's not real polite about what he says. But I will tell you, he's one of the hardest working people. He really understands the city it needs. He's really has the support of the mayor and the key people. And I know for us, he's somebody that I can always count on. He's responsive, a great guy. So he's here today just to give us a little bit of perspective about this from the city, and keep in mind you have to be a city resident in most cases. Sometimes there's comparable boards in the county where you have boards that have city and county residents. So that's sort of another perspective. So enjoy your lunch, and I think Deborah's going to start us off and talk to us about state boards and commissions. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you to Armstrong for hosting this. Thank you all for being here. It is a pleasure. One of the most challenging parts of my job is the recruitment process, and it's also one of my favorite parts of the job, to get out into the community and to encourage and meet people to apply for state boards and commissions. I know that before I began in this position, I had no idea how many opportunities were available out there. So I'm going to try to keep this to about 20 minutes and make you aware of what opportunities are out there and what the process is involved in applying and being appointed by the governor to a state board or commission. And then I think we're going to take some questions at the end. So just to give you a little bit of an overview, there are about 250 state boards and commissions. You've probably heard of many of them: the State Highway Commission, Administrative Hearing Commission, Tax Commission, Public Service Commission, and then there are probably many that you have not heard of. In a little while, I'm going to walk you through our website, but I'm just going to show you, when you do go to the website, it will list all of them here, and it's a little overwhelming, but so I'll walk you through it. But pretty much any area you can comprehend that you may have an interest in, there is probably a state board or commission that caters to that area for you to serve on. I also want to say that we are about ready to roll out in about 6 weeks a brand new, more user-friendly website, which is more searchable, easier to identify vacancies and expirations. So this is something that you will have to bear with just for a little while. So since the governor's taken office, we've made about 781 appointments, somewhere between that and 900. Our numbers are a little not solid right there, but at least 781 appointments to boards and commissions. It is the governor's goal, and he has charged me with making sure that the state boards and commissions reflect the diversity of the state in every respect. So that is one of my goals. He just is looking for energetic, talented individuals that want to get out there and donate their time to serve the community. So I'm sure some of you fit that bill. I want to talk a little bit, Kathy touched on this, there's a misconception out there that we have applications filling drawers and drawers, and we already know who the governor wants to appoint to every board and commission. That is not the case. We have an overwhelming amount of applications for about 10 of our 250 boards and commissions, and for the remainder of them, I am out finding people, encouraging them to apply. So. There are different functions that the boards serve. Some of them have actual rule-making authority. Some of them are just advisory. Some of them actually discipline the professions that they oversee. Some are in the different departments of the state. So the Department of Natural Resources houses the State Soil and Water Board, the Air Conservation Commission. Social Services has boards like the Child Abuse and Neglect Review and different social services boards. There is the Missouri Community Service Commission, which administers the AmeriCorps program and votes on who actually gets millions of dollars in funding from grants. DPS, Public Safety, has the Amusement Ride Safety Board, which people are always surprised to hear about, but if you think about it, you want to know that when you go to Six Flags, somebody has checked out those rides. Department of Corrections, Board of Probation and Parole, I can go on and on, I will spare you. The Department of Insurance and Professional Registration houses most of the boards and commissions, and so every profession, doctors, chiropractors, dentists, that you can think of is regulated by a particular board, and there is a public member slot on just about every one of those boards. So I want to just encourage all of you to apply. There are a lot of reasons for you to be interested in serving. It's a good opportunity for you to network, to meet people. It's a good opportunity just for you to have visibility and get involved in the community and to serve the community. And if it's something where you want to use the skills that you use in your everyday jobs, if you're an accountant, we have the State Board of Accountancy, or if it's just something where you have an interest and would like to be out there serving, then we have that public member spot too. So, for example, one of the boards we struggle most with in our office is the Board of Cosmetology and Barber Examiners. People are always a little surprised about that. But we are always looking to keep that board a quorum. So while there is spots for the barber examiners, or for the barber and the cosmetologist, we also have a couple public member spots on there, and they do important work. And so if anyone is just interested in that area, we would love to have applications from you to fill those spots. So I want to talk a little bit about qualifications to serve. They vary based on the board. Some of them have a political requirement, and so on our application, which I'll show you in a little while, we do ask for what your political affiliation is, because by statute it requires a balance of like 4 and 4 or whatever it is. Some of them have geographic requirements. Some of them require you to have certain professional licenses. It's laid out in each board and commission what it is that you have to have. So just to show you, if you go to our website, and I'll just take you down to the, we'll go to the Administrative Hearing Commission. So you click on that, it'll pull up all the information here on the right are the slots. And so you can see anyone that is serving in a term that is expired, there's no one on here, but if this had said 2011, the individuals continue to serve in those slots after their term expires until they're replaced. But if it has an expired date on it, that position is up for grabs. If it's vacant, it'll just say vacant. And then over here is the statute that you can click on, and it'll pull up and tell you all the requirements for the particular slots. This can get a little cumbersome, and there's a lot of details. This tries to summarize how many meetings they have and where they're at. But probably the best thing for you to do is to take one of my cards, which I will leave here, and get an idea of what you're interested in serving on, and then just call me and we can walk through your interests and what you think you may be qualified for. So I also wanted to point out, I'm going to leave some handouts here for you. When I leave our newsletter we put out, it gives you an idea of who we've been appointing, types of people, types of boards that we've been focused on. With 250 boards and my staff of myself and my deputy, we have to prioritize, and we can only focus on so many boards. And so we do have our list of priorities that we're working on, but if we find someone that is a well-qualified, energetic individual that is interested in a board that maybe we haven't been looking at more, we'll match you up and get you going on that board. So I also have this handout, which is just give you the website information and just a little blip of everything that goes into the appointment process. So that being said, how do you apply? The application is on this webpage, and again, once we roll out our new website, there's going to be an online application that you submit online. Right now, you have to go up to this link here, and it will pull up the application, and it looks overwhelming at first, but you just write "C resume" anywhere you can on the blanks, and then you sign the executive release and the Senate release at the back. And then you fax it or mail it into us. So it's a pretty thorough application. We have to do a lot of very thorough vetting up front to make sure that that you fit the right requirements, and that for your safety, not safety, but for your interest, because a lot of these require Senate confirmation, that there aren't any issues or concerns that are going to be a surprise to anyone later on. So that being said, we do a very thorough background process as well. So this release at the back of the application allows us to run that that background, and we also generally have you get fingerprinted at the Highway Patrol, and we run those through the FBI. Our background process involves a check on your taxes. We don't see your returns. It just tells us whether or not you're current on your taxes. It does a credit history to tell us if you have any collection items, things like bankruptcies. It does a criminal check. Now, again, there is not a fine, bright line as far as whether or not you'll be disqualified to serve if any of these things are on your background. It's just a matter of identifying those things and then either clearing them up before we move forward, or getting an explanation and then moving forward. So please don't think that if you have, we look at each case individually. If you have a DWI, something we're going to look really closely at, but if it's 15 years ago and you haven't had any problems since, it's probably not going to stop you from serving on a board or commission. So just want to identify that up front, and you can always talk to me again before you go through the whole process to make sure. So some boards, most boards, I would say about 85% of them require Senate confirmation. So let me kind of walk through the process. How this works is I come out and I look at our applications, and I meet people, and I work up a board, I look at the statute, and who do we need, what are the requirements, I come up with a slate, and then I meet with the governor. And then the governor goes through every single appointment, and he identifies and proves who he wants to appoint for every single slot. So there's no surprise, no mistake, no coincidence that you are being chosen for a board. The governor has selected you specifically for that board. Then we start the background process, and you go through all those hoops, you clear the background, and then if you're in one of those 85% of the boards that require Senate confirmation, we reach out to your state senator and ask them to support your appointment. If you have a relationship with them, we'll ask you to make contact with them maybe, but we mostly handle that process at the end. And then once we get the support from your state senator, you have to come down to Jeff City. Now, I don't want to bog you down with too many of the details, because the process is different whether the legislature is in session or out of session. If it's out of session, you start serving immediately, and then when they come back in, you have to be confirmed within 30 days of them coming back in January. If they are in session, you don't start serving until they confirm you, and that could happen anytime from January to May. So you would come on down to Jefferson City. We have a little reception in the governor's office, and then you come on into the committee room in the Senate lounge, and you appear before a committee of senators. Generally, it's a very smooth process because we do all the heavy lifting up front, and they may ask you questions, they may just thank you, and then hopefully they vote your appointment out of committee, and then it goes to the Senate floor, and then the entire Senate has to vote to approve and confirm your appointment, and then you're on. The term lengths vary based on the different boards and commissions, and if someone was in it and resigned, you'll go in usually for just the remainder of that term. But again, those are all just very specific details that I can talk to you all about case by case for what you're looking at. Let's see here. I also wanted to just throw out there that the governor also does a training for new boards members twice a year. We bring everyone back down and do a 3-hour training. The director of policy, Jeff Harris, does a discussion on policy initiatives. The counsel to the governor talks about different legal issues you may confront. And then we do a budget review. The director of the budget department, Linda Luberine, does that. And then we all go over to the governor's mansion, and it's his opportunity to meet you and thank you and take pictures. So. But first things first, so I'm very hopeful that you will all get on our website as soon as possible, or call me. Look at the different areas. You can apply for as many as you want, but usually keep it to maybe 5, and that way we can, if we can get back there. Let's see. Or if you have a different, if you just have ideas of what areas you're interested in, we can match you up. So with that.
Let just a couple of comments as we move on. As you think about this, if there's something in here that is interest to you, if you think you have the right background, always check with your employer. I have always done that. You don't want any surprises there. There may be reasons that somebody in your firm wants the same position, or maybe there's a conflict of interest. I'll give you an example. I see Nino over there from Edward Jones. Connie Silverstein was a partner at Edward Jones. And we thought she'd be a great candidate to the Board of Curators, which is one of those plum appointments. There's a lot of people who want to be on that. Mm-hmm. And she was nominated. She was a University of Missouri St. Louis grad. We thought she would be perfect. And indeed, so did other people. But there was one issue. Edward Jones would have to say that they weren't going to do any business with the university during the period of her appointment, which I think is a 6-year appointment. And so think about it. That was a real handicap for the firm. Now the firm decided that her being on that was important enough that they would abstain from business for that period of time. But it's sort of an example where you want to be careful that you're not getting into conflicts that will later affect the firm.
Yeah, I'll also just comment on that with the conflict issue, it comes up on a lot of boards, especially since a lot of these boards, you have to be an expert in the field that the board regulates. But what normally happens, that's important and that comes up, but what normally happens is you would just have to recuse yourself from any votes that deal with whatever your conflict is. So that's a lot of times the way it's handled, but the most important message is that you have open communication with your employer up front about what you're interested in, and then just talk to us about any concerns so that we can handle those issues up front.
One of the first boards that I was put on seemed like a minor, small thing, and sort of at the level I was at in education, which was called the Private Industry Councils, which Jeff probably remembers these. Well, little did I know that these workforce development boards are some of the most controversial boards around. I didn't know that. I was at a university at the time. It made sort of sense. The university said, we would like you to be on that board. I lived in St. Louis County, so I was appointed by the county executive. Well, it turned out in my tenure, there was a huge controversy that developed that actually became a great embarrassment for the county executive. I was not very politically sophisticated at the time, so it was like way over my pay grade. I bring this issue up because I do feel that when you're appointed by someone, there is some obligation, at least, to be in communication, particularly when these kind of things happen. And in this case, I actually went to the county executive's office and said, hey, I got to get off this thing. I don't understand what's happening here. And in the process, they explained to me the politics of it. And they said, we really need somebody like yourself who's not in the middle of things. You don't have any skin in this game. And we just need level-headed thinking, and would you please stay on? I said, absolutely, I would. So these are some of the things to think about. And Robert, I know these are things now that you could maybe address more, so if you might want to talk about what's it like to be appointed, and tell them a little bit about what does the Public Service Commission do?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. And let me start by thanking Katie for putting this all together. Thank Kathy for her commitment to the Young Professionals Network and in the very kind introduction. I found the Young Professionals Network to be one of the networking organizations that really tries to have the extra added value benefit of advancing your career in the most beneficial and meaningful ways. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself, and I'll tell you about my background, and then I'll talk about the Public Service Commission, and I'll talk a little briefly about my confirmation process and board's service in general. I'm a native St. Louis, and I'm a lawyer by training. I worked for Governor Nixon when he was Attorney General earlier in my legal career, and I left there and was an attorney at Posanelli Shugart for 7 years, and I was a partner there. And I left in January of 2009 to take a job with Attorney General Koster as his chief of staff, and so I was working in Jefferson City, and I did that for about 9 months, and then the governor asked me to serve on the Public Service Commission, and that was in July of 2009, and so that's what I'm doing now. The Public Service Commission, the name's kind of misleading, I think. It's a we are the state regulator for all the public utilities in the state, so gas, electric, water, sewer, telecommunications to a lesser degree. There are 5 commissioners, and we're appointed by the governor and subject to Senate confirmation for 6-year terms. There are no particular expertise background that you have to have. It happens that all 5 of us at one point were lawyers. We're down 2 commissioners now, but the 3 of us that are remaining, we're all 3 lawyers as well. It's a full-time job, so that's some of the boards and commissions require part-time service or monthly service. Public Service Commission is a full-time job, and so we sit as commissioners and preside over cases dealing with utility rate increases. We also have rulemaking authority for under certain statutes dealing with energy efficiency and renewable energy, for instance, and that's what we do. So we are the folks that decide whether Ameren and Laclede and the other utilities are going to raise your rates or not. So that's what we do on a daily basis. I got appointed in July of '09 and began serving immediately because the legislature was not in session. And so I was able to serve from July until January of 2010 when the legislature reconvened. And my confirmation process, I think, was typical in some ways and maybe atypical in others. Part of my portfolio when I worked as Attorney General Koster's Chief of Staff was to liaison with the legislature. And so I had some contacts and experience dealing with the senators. And so I had developed good relationships with many of them. So my senator is Robin Wright Jones, and she sponsored my nomination. And I knew some of the senators that were on the gubernatorial appointments committee, and I took it upon myself to go around and reintroduce myself and ask them if they had any questions for me, and if there were any questions that they anticipated that they would like to ask me during my hearing. And to each and every senator, regardless of party affiliation, was professional and gracious, and each indicated that they wouldn't ask me embarrassing questions on the floor of the Senate or in the hearing room, and that if they had any questions for me, if they found something troubling that they wanted to discuss with me, they would do it in advance of the hearing, and I appreciated that. And as it turned out, there weren't any questions that they had, and my hearing was very, very smooth. I always tell this kind of entertaining story. You go down to Jefferson City for your confirmation, and you meet in the governor's office, and then you go to the hearing room. And you can have your family there and friends, and the Senate photographer gives you an opportunity before you come before the gubernatorial appointments committee to get your picture taken. And so my wife and my 5-year-old daughter at the time, I think, were in Jefferson City with me that day, and they came and sat up front with me and got our picture taken. And my wife and my daughter were walking back to their seat in the audience, and my daughter runs back up the aisle and jumps in my lap and wants to stay with me during the hearing. And Rob Mayer was the president pro tem of the Senate and chairman of the committee at the time. He said, "Well, Commissioner Kinney, we can't ask you any tough questions now. You got your 5-year-old daughter sitting on your lap." And so they didn't, and it was done. And I was voted out of committee later that afternoon, and then your nomination was submitted to the full Senate for a full vote, and I was unanimously confirmed. And so it's a very smooth experience. I will say this. I think Deborah touched on all of the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of serving on various boards and commissions. I want to tell you a little bit about why I think board service is significant and important, and there's really 2 reasons. I mean, there's altruistic reasons, and then there are purely selfish, self-interested reasons, and I think both are important. I think service to the community, for those of us who have been blessed with good education and good jobs, it's an obligation that we have to be of service and apply our talents in areas in which we're maybe not getting paid. So that's one reason, and I think that's applicable for purposes of what we're talking about. I think that's applicable not just to state boards and commissions, but nonprofit boards and commissions in general. It's just the right thing to do. But that doesn't mean it can't also be beneficial to your career. And so the secondary point I would make about board service and commissions is that it provides you an excellent opportunity to network with other like-minded folks who are leaders in their particular industries. And if you are in a business like I was when I was in private practice, where you do have to generate business, and that's always what I kind of stressed with Kathy about the significance of these types of organizations, that the social networking is fun and that's good too, but I need to see some business generating outcomes out of it. Otherwise, it's not advancing me in my career. And I will say that you get an opportunity in these organizations and the events that the RBC does in particular to network with folks that are in a position to advance your career, either through offering you a better opportunity or sending business your way. And there are concrete examples of that. I was actively involved with United Way when I was still in private practice, and you get invited to these nice receptions, but the folks that come to those receptions are folks that are in leadership positions at their corporations. And it was a couple of years of of effort and work, but I did ultimately generate some good legal business as a result of my involvement with the United Way. And it was meeting somebody who was a general counsel at a large corporation at one of these events, and then just following up with them over the course of the next 2 years with lunches and Christmas cards and everything else, and the occasional phone call. And that kept me at the top of his mind. And one of my mentors at the law firm said, people don't hire law firms, they hire lawyers. And your job is to make sure that when they're thinking about a lawyer or an accountant or CPA or whatever your discipline is, that you're the person that they're thinking about. And so when this guy had a piece of litigation that he needed somebody to work on, I came to his mind. And that was initially the result of being involved with the United Way and then following up. So I say all that to say the boards and commissions are significant and important because community service is important, but they're also a fantastic way, I think, to meld your own personal interests with your career development. So I'm very fortunate to be on the Public Service Commission. It's some of the most fascinating, complex, sophisticated legal work I've ever done in my career, and similarly some of the most complicated and sophisticated public policy work. And I'm very fortunate to have had the opportunity to be appointed by Governor Nixon, and I think it'll be something that I will continue to use in the private sector when my term is up. So with that, I'm happy to be here sharing my experiences with you and look forward to answering some questions. Thanks.
I will tell you, we felt very honored and proud when Robert was a member of the steering committee and got that call to be the chief of staff for the Attorney General. That's a very, very significant call. And then several months later to be called to the Public Service Commission is fairly remarkable. But I think your example is a really good one of putting the groundwork in along the way. I think that's so terribly important to put those little pieces in place that sometimes can add up to things. Recently, President Obama talked about the Secret Service agents in South America and said, oh, those knuckleheads were doing this, that, and the other. And I must say, I thought of Jeff Rainford. One of Jeff's favorite words is those knuckleheads. So I guess you call the president.
Well, I'm glad it was that side of it.
Yeah. So I assume from time to time you've appointed knuckleheads to boards. You don't find that out until after the appointment. But anyway, if you could talk about some of the city appointments.
Well, first of all, good afternoon, Kathy. Thanks for having us, and the folks here at the law firm. It really is a beautiful space and beautiful views. Nice place to conduct business. You know, there's sort of an aphorism that says we get the government we deserve, and that is true in America. I always hear people complaining about the government, and I've been in the government, city government for 10 years, and that's absolutely true. Most people think, when they say that or hear that, they think of elections, and that's certainly true. Being involved in the political process is one way to get the government you want and deserve, but being involved civically is also a big part of it. And so there was a conference this past weekend where people were, said things like, don't wait on City Hall to turn this neighborhood around, and I'm like, they're really looking at this backwards. I mean, I view city government really more as a utility that belongs to the people, and it's human connections and human achievement in the private and nonprofit sector that make countries, states, counties, cities, and communities and neighborhoods better. But we do belong to the people. We belong to you. We work for you. That's what government is. It's really more of a utility in my mind. We put police officers on the streets to keep us safe. We put out fires. We fill potholes, but you create jobs, you innovate, you strengthen neighborhoods, you move into neighborhoods and make them better. And certainly one way that you can make your government better is to be involved in your government. And I'm here today to invite you to do that. I brought with me Patrick Brown. Patrick is is involved and is the mayor's liaison to the two things I'm going to talk about today. There's lots of ways for you all to get involved in your community, in your city, and in your government. Because of the topic today, I'm going to talk about two of them. And invite you and encourage you to get involved. For very, very practical reasons, the city needs younger people today. Now, younger people I use very loosely because I'm 52, so somebody who's 45 is younger, so I don't really define what younger people is. But it is a very practical reason that we do. There was an article in the newspaper earlier this week that said more people are moving into the city of St. Louis than any other county in the region. Now, we all know that about as many people are moving out as are moving in, and that's a topic for another day. But for today, we lead the region in the growth in the number of people who are choosing to move into the city of St. Louis. USA Today had an article last year that the city of St. Louis had the second highest rate of growth of young professionals moving into the central part of the city, which I think they meant basically downtown, Soulard, and areas like that. Young people are moving into the city, and that's a very good thing. So that's why, you know, sometimes you hear young people are the future. For us, young people are the present. And that's one reason we have a 26-year-old man who's in charge of boards of commissions and in charge of a thing which I'm about to describe called the Vanguard Cabinet. The mayor encourages all St. Louisans, including senior citizens, to get involved, but we are especially focused on encouraging younger, not necessarily young, but younger folks to get involved in civic life. And I'm going to talk again about 2 ways to do that today. There's many more than that, but 2 ways today. One of them is a relatively new creation called the Vanguard Cabinet. And the Vanguard Cabinet are young, creative, professional, and grassroots leaders in the city of St. Louis. They operate, you know, Patrick is our liaison, but they really are advisors to the mayor. The mayor doesn't tell them what to do. They, in essence, for want of a better way to put it, tell the mayor what to do, and they work on real initiatives. And the aim is to make St. Louis the place for ambitious urbanites who are committed to improving the city through innovation and collaboration. So it's a relatively new board or commission, but already it's had two significant achievements. One is we passed a bicycle ordinance recently that changes our zoning code to right now. The zoning code really focuses on cars and parking lots. This changes it so it also focuses on bicycling and cycling as a form of transportation. And an initiative you may have read about in the paper earlier this week to use design to reduce crime. We have obviously a lot of abandoned property in the city. We also have some landlords who probably need some direction and some thought about how they can use design, lighting, and other things to reduce crime. And these ideas came from the Vanguard Cabinet. And the Vanguard Cabinet has 8 different committees. And the Vanguard Cabinet is an ad hoc, so it is not created under law. So there really are no rules on who can join or can't join. So if you live in the city, work in the city, or simply play a lot in the city and you want to spend some time on it, Patrick gave you his card and also gave you a 1 sheet that sort of describes the Vanguard Cabinet, and I would encourage you to join, get on a committee, and you will actually see results. One of the things I talked to the mayor and Patrick after they came up with this idea, I said, hey, the really important thing is if we're going to get people involved, they got to see something that comes out of their energy and something that comes out of their participation. People aren't just going to keep going to meetings and talking and talking and talking. At some point, some kind of result or some kind of action is going to have to come out of it, and that is absolutely what is happening with the Vanguard Cabinet. The people who are in it today are already making a difference in a very short period of time in their city. And the other are boards and commissions. And the boards and commissions are created under the law, so some of them are a bit outdated. I'm surprised there's not a board that regulates spitting on sidewalks from the tuberculosis days that's still in effect. So you've got a list of them, and you're going to giggle when you see a couple of them. We just haven't bothered to take them off of the books. But out of those 90, most of them are working boards and commissions where you can make in some manner, depending on what you want to do, a real difference. So some of them is, kind of to use Kathy's words, are plum appointments, like the Airport Commission and the Convention and Visitors Commission. They are plum appointments, but we really are trying harder to put the best people possible on there so we have the best airport, the best convention business, and that sort of thing. So those are highly competitive to get on, but extremely important not only to the city but to the entire metropolitan area. Then we have a highly visible and probably controversial boards like the Preservation Board and the Planning Commission. The Preservation Board, some of you may have read that Father Biondi wanted to tear down some buildings, and that made news for about a week, and that was through the Preservation Board, which makes a decision on whether historic structures can be torn down. We have for instance, on that one, we have a bias towards tearing down buildings, and we have a bias against it, and I sort of view it as the death penalty. Even if you agree with the death penalty, you certainly want to make sure that before we put a human being to death that we have the right person, because you can't reverse that decision. The same is true with buildings. Once you tear a historic building down, you can't go, oops, I made a mistake, and put it back up. So that, for instance, is a board that is not necessarily highly visible, but is very, very important because historic preservation is a big deal in the city. And it also, from time to time, you kind of have to have a thick skin if you're on a board like the Preservation Board or the board that's right above that, the Planning Commission. Then there are philanthropic boards, and these are boards where there's probably an expectation that you're going to have to be able to raise money. And going in, you kind of need to know that, and that would potentially be the zoo or the art museum or something like that. And then there are the low-key working boards, which do not get any kind. You know, you go to the meeting of the Board of Adjustment, and there'll be 3 people in the audience, and most people haven't even heard of the Board of Adjustment. But it's very, very important to the to how city government works and making it responsive to people. So you heard you can't fight City Hall. So you know what that sort of implies is that if I want to put a new bathroom in my house and we have certain code requirements and I don't meet them, you can't fight City Hall as we tell you no and you have nowhere to go. When in fact in the city government we have various boards of appeals which are citizens, not bureaucrats, but citizens who hear the appeals and say, oh yeah, you can build that bathroom, the bureaucrats were wrong or whatever it is. And so that would be like the Board of Adjustment where you might go, and I know this is a little bit complicated, but it's important because we need citizens on these boards to make sure that the government is treating its citizens fairly. We need other citizens so that people do have a place to go and be heard and be treated fairly. And that's what some of our boards, especially our appeals boards, are about, is to make sure that the bureaucrats can't be arbitrary and that people have a place to go to have their petitions heard. So that's an important board. To get on either one of these, Kathy sort of mentioned, you know, an implication. There are certain boards where we want people who are going to do what we want them to do to be on the board, and that's just a reality of life. And they're not all of them, probably about a quarter of them. We were going to want to put people on there who are going to have to know. The mayor's going to call you and say, here's how you got to vote on this particular thing. But most of the boards we want, as Kathy mentioned, independent people who will bring value and make the place better. For instance, at the airport, we really need a smart board at the airport who can help the staff at the airport make that the best airport in the world. And I always think of boards through some of these corporations like Enron. I bet you the Enron guys today wish they had had a board of directors who was more independent and said, hey, maybe you ought not be doing that, and was actually paying attention, even though it probably would have been, to put it mildly, inconvenient at the time. But I bet today all of them looking back wish they had a board that had operated and governed the way that a board should. So one of the things I always like to have people think about is that if you get on a board, you do need to understand what the time commitment is and what the work commitment is, because some of them will take up a lot of your time and some of them not so much of your time. But I'm on some philanthropic boards, and there are also some of our boards where we keep telling people, you got to go to the meetings, you got to provide the input, and if you don't, you know, we don't want to embarrass you, but we're going to take you off. So if you're interested in a board, one of our boards or commissions, you have a list. I would encourage you, Patrick, you handed out your cards? Okay. Patrick has his cards. I would encourage you to, at least through email, if you're interested, ask whether there's an opening, ask what it would entail to be on it, and the time commitment and that sort of thing, because if you get on a board, the flip side is you do have a responsibility, and you don't want to get into something and then find out you don't have the time for it, and you're letting people down. And then lastly, we do have some very interesting boards that are working boards that we have openings on now, and that we sometimes have difficulty filling, in part because they are working boards. If we pay anything, it's going to be not enough to even cover your gas. So you know, these are voluntary, and some of these we have difficulty getting enough people on, but it also would be an opportunity. So for instance, our Affordable Housing Commission has opening. The Affordable Housing Commission basically spends about $4 million creating and expanding of what it sounds like, affordable housing. The Civil Rights Enforcement Commission has openings, same thing. Because the federal government and state government enforce civil rights, we have a lesser role, but we still have a role in ensuring, especially in housing, that protecting people's civil rights. The Forest Park Advisory Council, which again is an advisory council, not a governance board, but would give some people who are willing to take the time some input into one of the jewels of St. Louis, and I think in your survey may have been the #1 thing that you all pointed to as far as when you are away from work, the kind of things you like to do. We have openings on the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission, again, that one's not so as interesting as Forest Park, but very important. We have a very, very old a planning code, and we're talking about changing it, but it would be an expensive proposition. So in the meantime, we have to work with our plan, which is old, which means there are lots of appeals and things, and the Planning Commission decides those sorts of things. If something is contrary to the planning, or we want to make changes to it, it goes through the Planning Commission. And again, if you're like an architect or an urban planner or somebody who maybe you're a lawyer but you're interested in those kinds of things, certain kind of people really are fascinated by urban planning, and that would be a great opportunity to make a contribution. St. Louis Jefferson Solid Waste District, Patrick, what does that do?
They help work with the waste department.
We're talking about trash. Okay. Soldiers Memorial.
There's a real exciting one for you.
Well, but that's a good point, because lots of people want to be on the cool ones and the sexy ones and the high profile ones, but a lot of these are working commissions. And again, city government, we want city government to be responsive to people, and sometimes bureaucrats make arbitrary decisions, and sometimes it's these working commissions and boards that really make the government work and make it work for people. So they're not very, unless you have a special interest in them, they're sometimes certainly not something that you would ever want to write a novel about. You put it that way.
Except for we did find when County Executive Dooley thought it would be a good idea to go to one trash collector. We found out that people are terribly
right.
Aligned with their trash collector. It became a huge, huge controversy in his administration because they really didn't foresee this alignment people had over trash collection.
Right. Soldiers Memorial Building Commission is an important one. The Soldiers Memorial was a WPA project built during the Depression to honor, as it says, soldiers. Obviously, we've moved beyond soldiers now. There are some really smart people who have a plan to turn that into a museum that really would be spectacular. And so obviously the people in the Soldiers Memorial Building Commission, that if you have an affinity or a respect or an interest in veterans, it is Soldiers Memorial because of the times when it was built, but it really is more of a veterans memorial. That would be an interesting one. And then Kathy mentioned the Workforce Investment Board, which is, that again is a working board that in essence has a great deal of say in how federal and state grants for workforce development are spent. And as Kathy mentioned, there's lots of different ways that ends up being controversial, but controversy also means interesting. So the Workforce Investment Board. Those are not the only boards that have openings, but those are boards at the moment have the greatest need. But even if you see one on here, from the zoo to the airport to the art museum, whatever it is, do not hesitate to get in touch with Patrick. He has his card here. Most of the boards and commissions do have a residency requirement. There may be a small number that don't, but most of them have a residency requirement. Some of them are specific. For instance, the Affordable Housing Commission, I think housing activists get a specific seat on that. I think maybe architects and planners have a specific seat. So some of them have requirements. Some of them do require Board of Aldermen approval, but most of them do not. But Patrick can help you with the time commitment, what our expectation is on the people who go on that board, and what, if any, approval process there is beyond the mayor putting you on there. Again, if you don't live in the city or aren't eligible for our boards, I would encourage you to get involved with the state, get involved with the county. If you live in a municipality, get involved in your municipality. Because I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning. This is not true in every country, and it's not true of every time in every period in this country. But right now, you get the government you deserve. You get the neighborhood, the community, the municipality, the state you deserve. I as a government guy often get irritated when people, and right now the view of government is very, very low, and as somebody who's sort of a student of all government, I sort of, it sometimes gets irritating because I'm like, there's every opportunity for every individual to at least make some difference. Now, does that mean one person can turn the whole ship around? No, but you can certainly make enough of a difference. And then, if you want to come tell me how bad government is because you're doing your little part, then I will pat you on the back and go, you're right, it's too bad everybody's not helping out the way you are. And it's one of these things where, we can all hope that the next guy does it or the next guy does it, but, at some point, it's something that all of us in a democracy, all of us have a responsible for our communities. And again, I've only mentioned 2 ways you can do it. You can certainly do it through the RBC, you can do it through charities, you can do it through neighborhood associations. We were just asked to talk about 2 of them, and so there's many opportunities for you to contribute to your community. And I want to close again by inviting you and saying that we want more young people involved in the civic affairs in the city of St. Louis, and we're inviting you to do it. And if we are ever not living up to the challenge I gave you, if we're not upholding our end of the bargain, I would certainly encourage you to contact Patrick, contact me, or even contact Mayor Slay directly. So, Kathy, thanks for having us today, and
Thank you. That was
appreciate it.
excellent. Really good.